The cheetah was dead before the sun even rose. No one at the Tambara sanctuary expected that. She had been restless through the night. It was true, but the veterinarians thought it was normal labor tension. When the caretaker Amara arrived at dawn with a flashlight still in her hand, she found 3 damp and trembling cubs pressed against their mother's cold body, trying to nurse from something that no longer had warmth to give. She stood still for a few seconds, unable to process what she was seeing. Then she ran. The 3 cubs were less than 12 hours old. Without colostrum, without warmth, without a mother, their chances of making it to nightfall were almost zero. The sanctuary director, Dr. Ifeoma, called the entire team into an emergency meeting that lasted less than 20 minutes because there was no time. Someone suggested bottle feeding every 2 hours. Another mentioned transferring them to a specialized center 300 kilometers away. None of the options were fast enough. It was Amara who said the name out loud. Kibbo. The silence that followed said everything. Kibbo was a 7-year-old male lion who lived in the eastern sector of the sanctuary. He had arrived 3 years earlier, rescued from an illegal circus with chain marks still visible on his paws. He was an animal that carried history in his eyes, too quiet for his species, observant, with a way of sitting at the edge of the enclosure and staring at the horizon that made the older staff whisper that he seemed to be waiting for something. But there was one detail Amara couldn't forget. 2 weeks earlier, Kibbo's companion had lost a cub on its 3rd day of life. Since then, he slept near the place where the little one had been buried. He didn't eat properly. He didn't respond to the caretaker's calls. A grieving lion, 3 motherless cubs. The idea was insane, and everyone in the room knew it. Dr. Ifeoma looked at the cubs inside the thermal box, then looked at Amara. "Prepare the transition area," she said, "and pray that he doesn't see them as food. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and tell in the comments what you think and which city or country you are watching from." Amara knew Kibbo better than anyone in that sanctuary. She knew how he snorted when he was irritated, knew the exact tone of the roar he let out when he felt threatened, knew that he turned his face to the left when he was assessing something dangerous. And that was exactly what he did when the box with the 3 cubs was placed 4 meters from the dividing fence. He turned his face to the left, nostrils flared, his entire body motionless. Amara didn't breathe for almost a minute. The cubs whimpered. It was a thin, desperate sound, the kind of sound that seems smaller than it should be, as if the body itself already knew it was losing the battle. Kibbo took a step toward the fence, then another. The team behind Amara instinctively stepped back, but she stayed where she was, with her hands stretched behind her asking for silence. The lion sniffed the air for a long time. Then something happened that no one could properly explain in the official report of that day. Kibbo lay down. He didn't retreat, didn't growl, didn't show any sign of aggression. He simply folded his legs and lay on his side, with his muzzle pointed toward the box, as if he were standing guard. Amara waited 40 minutes before opening the access between the enclosures. A gap. Just that. The smallest of the cubs, whom she was already mentally calling Deo, stumbled out first. His little legs had no steadiness at all, and he fell twice before covering half a meter. Kibbo lifted his head, watched, and when the cub got close enough and touched its damp nose to the lion's massive paw, something in Kibbo's expression changed in a way Amara had never seen in any animal before. He lowered his head slowly and licked the cub, just once, but it was enough. The other 2 came out of the box minutes later, drawn by their siblings' scent, and found Kibbo motionless, allowing those 3 tiny and strange creatures to nestle against his body as if it were the most natural thing in the world. That night, for the first time in 2 weeks, the lion ate. What no one knew yet was what those cubs would become, and what it would cost all of them. The following months were the strangest the Tambara sanctuary had ever recorded. Kibbo didn't just tolerate the 3 cubs. He raised them with a dedication that left the veterinarians silent every time They entered the enclosure to carry out their daily observations. Deo, the smallest, slept curled around the lion's neck, as if that were the safest place in the world. And maybe it was. The two females, whom Amara began to call Safi and Rena, quickly discovered that Kibbo's ears were the perfect toy, and he allowed it, with a patience that seemed almost deliberate. But there was something that intrigued Amara from the second month onward. Kibbo taught them, not in the way a mother cheetah would teach, with speed and hunting and technique. He taught in his own way. He stood still while the three jumped on him, let them learn balance on his own body, growled low when one of them strayed too far from the safe perimeter, and that specific sound, different from any other he made the cubs return immediately. It was a language they had created together, without anyone planning it. Dr. Ifioma began to document everything. At 4 months, the 3 cheetahs were already big enough to cause serious scratches, but none of them ever scratched Kibbo with intent. There was an awareness there that was difficult to name without sounding exaggerated. Amara wrote in the field journal, "They know he is different from them, and it doesn't seem to matter." It was around that time that Kibbo's behavior began to change in a subtle way that only she noticed. He slept less. He stayed on his feet for longer periods, always positioned between the cubs and the outer fence of the enclosure. When inspection helicopters flew overhead, he stood up before the sound even reached human ears. It was as if something inside him had awakened, an ancient instinct that wasn't exactly paternal, but that looked very much like protection in the purest sense of the word. The problem was that the cheetahs were growing too, and with growth came instincts that no emotional bond could hold back forever. Amara saw it in the runs they made at dusk, in the way their eyes locked onto birds and hares beyond the fence, in that new tension that appeared in their muscles when something moved quickly. Kibbo saw it too, and it was impossible to know what he thought about it. The separation happened on a day in March, 3 years before what no one dared to call the end. The team took the 3 cheetahs on a morning when Kibbo was being attended to in the veterinary sector. It was a deliberate decision. No one wanted to see what would happen if he were present. Amara stayed outside while the transfer was carried out, her hands in her pockets and her eyes fixed on the ground. When Kibbo returned to the empty enclosure that afternoon, he stood at the entrance for far too long, sniffing the air in every direction. Then he lay down in the place where Deo always slept and didn't get up until the next day. The 3 years that followed were about adaptation. The cheetahs were relocated to a large sector, learned to hunt with the help of the caretakers, developed the reflexes that nature had reserved for them since before they were born. Safi became the most independent, Rena the most territorial. Deo, always the smallest, surprised everyone by becoming the fastest of the 3, as if he had kept something in reserve for years. Kibbo remained in the eastern sector, quieter than before. The accident that changed everything happened on an afternoon of strong wind, when a storm knocked down part of the fence that separated the sectors. The security team was immediately called, but before they arrived, Amara saw something on the camera that made her stop completely. Deo was on the wrong side of the fence, and Kibbo was less than 20 meters away from him. She ran, but when she arrived, what she found was not what her caretaker instincts had prepared her to face. Deo was standing still, his whole body in a posture she knew well, the same as when he was a cub and wanted attention. Head lowered, ears relaxed, tail swaying slowly. And Kibbo, the lion who could kill with a single swipe, was standing still too, his nostrils working, his eyes fixed on the cheetah in front of him. Kibbo was the first to move. He walked slowly up to Deo and pressed his muzzle against the cheetah's forehead, exactly as he used to do when he was 3 days old and didn't weigh more than a bottle of water. Deo closed his eyes. Safi and Rena appeared through the opening in the fence minutes later and did the same, each one pressing their head against the enormous body of the lion who had once chosen to stay. Amara couldn't write anything in the field journal that night. The page remained blank. The Tambara sanctuary had never seen anything like it, and Dr. Ifeoma knew that better than anyone. In the weeks following the reunion, the team made a decision that went against every protocol they had studied: to allow supervised meetings between Kibbo and the three cheetahs once a week in a neutral space prepared specifically for this. The decision was not unanimous. Two veterinarians formally opposed it, and their arguments were valid, based on science, on statistics, on everything the book said about adult predators and territory and instinct. But the books had not seen what Amara saw that windy afternoon. The meetings always took place in the late afternoon, when the heat subsided and the light turned that orange hue that makes everything seem slower. Kibbo arrived first always. He sat in the center of the space and waited. And the three cheetahs entered with that characteristic energy of their species, fast and electric. But when they got close to him, something in their bodies changed. A relaxation that was not submission, it was recognition. Deo still slept leaning against him when the session allowed it. Amara observed everything from behind the glass and thought about something she had read years earlier, a line from a biologist whose name she had forgotten: that animals do not lie about what they feel. They have no vocabulary to disguise it. What you see is what exists. What existed there was real. Kibbo had not taught the cheetahs to be lions. He had not erased what they were. Safi remained territorial. Rena remained fast. Deo continued to surprise everyone. They were completely cheetahs in every muscle and every instinct. But they also carried something that no wild cheetah would carry: the memory of having been loved before knowing what they were. And Kibbo carried theirs. Amara closed the field journal on the last day of the year and stared at the cover for a while. Then she wrote a single line on the final page, without date, without title. He did not know it was impossible, so he simply did it. Some stories exist to remind us that love does not need an explanation to be real. It only needs to happen. If this story touched you in any way, leave your comment below telling what you thought and which city or country you're watching from. Subscribe to the channel and like the video so that more people can find stories like this.